Good morning, everyone, and welcome again to Word of Faith Response. And we're so glad you're tuning in. You heard a great program on Friday if you were listening, and that was with Derek Head. And he told the miraculous story of his life, but he didn't finish. And there's so much more to hear. And he is back with us today. A little bit about Derek. As I said on Friday, our church has a very active prison ministry. There's a couple gentlemen that head that prison ministry up. That's Douglas and DeWitt, and they were on our program several weeks ago. And you can actually hear from them if you will go to our website at wordoffaithfellowship.org. We now have all of the radio programs on our website. It's very easy to find. You'll see a link that says radio programs. And you can also tune in to listen to Derek Head's first part of his testimony on Friday if you missed it, because we're going to pick back up with Derek today because there's so many powerful things in his life that God has done, and we want to share with you all the things that Jesus has done in his life. One of the things that we shared about was that Derek actually met us in our church through the prison ministry at Rutherford Correctional Center, where he was an inmate for approximately 15 years. And prior to that, Derek served a prison sentence of 10 years in New Jersey. Is that right, Derek?
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. And so Derek actually grew up going between New Jersey, Washington, D.C., and Rutherford County, North Carolina. He has a large family, and all his family was throughout those areas. And Derek shared on Friday about his life growing up. He actually grew up in the Nation of Islam, a very devoted Muslim. Ended up actually selling Muslim newspapers, participated in all of the religious ceremonies, and spoke Arabic, read the Quran, very devoted. And also, he had a life of violence. And in that lifestyle of violence, he ended up in a very serious shootout. And he didn't realize it, but some of the shooting involved undercover federal agents. He didn't know they were federal agents at the time. But that led to his first prison sentence, where he actually was facing attempted murder. And the sentence started off looking at 99 years, but was reduced to 20 years. And through a course of events, because he was a first offender and had a clean record, ended up doing 10 years of time. He was released, and he came here to Rutherford County. This would have been the year 2000. And so we're going to pick back up here. He came down here. He was with a lot of people doing a lot of things that he shouldn't have been doing. And so we're going to pick back up at this time period. Derek, would you take over and share all the things that God's done in your life?
Yes, thank you, Mom. All right, we'll start from where I left off. When I first arrived here, I wasn't under any paper as far as my release. It was an expiration date. But what they required of me to do is I had to report down here to Rutherford County to the parole and probation officer and let them know that a violent criminal was moving into their city. So I still had the temper and the anger and the attitude, and I didn't understand why I was sitting in their office, and they trying to explain to me they didn't have a file on me yet, and could I come back the next Monday? And I'm like, what for what? I'm not on paper. It's a mandatory release expiration date, and a lot of, so eventually they said, well, you could just call and see if your file arrived here yet. So the next Monday I called, and the file didn't get there yet, and they said, well, can you call next Monday? So the very next Monday I called, and it was like, well, the file is here. Could you come in? And I'm like, come in for what? Like that you have everything there, my history. So I came and spoke with them, and it really wasn't much they could do about it because it was a mandatory release. I wasn't on parole or probation or anything. However, this allowed the state of North Carolina to know that a violent criminal convicted and was living in their city. So anytime something would occur, such as like a murder or assault with a deadly weapon, with intent to commit murder, anything like that, I'm one of the first suspects that they want to come and question. So, you had officers like they might show up on my property, and it's private property, and I'm shooing them away. I'm not answering none of your questions. Either I'm under arrest or not, that type. So, needless to say, several things occurred, and I was accused of a few things. I wasn't convicted of any of them. They either had to throw it out or dismiss it, or witnesses wouldn't show up, and so all of these was taking place within the next 2 years, from 2000 to 2002, while I was residing here in North Carolina between Rutherford and Asheville. So eventually that led to my charge in Asheville with shooting in an occupied property, vehicle, and armed robbery and second-degree kidnapping and all that. They gave it to kidnapping because anytime you detain people, it's like a kidnapping also. So this was 2002, and the first trial was a hung juror because they was using testimony for people who was already incarcerated or facing charges to plead for a lesser charge. They was like, you remember that shooting that happened here? I can tell you who did it, and that's how I wound up getting involved. They told on me in exchange for a lighter sentence or whatever it was that they received. So the first trial was a hung juror, and the state decided to waste a lot of money and retry me again, and so they did. And the second trial, I was convicted. So I was sentenced. The minimum was 15 years. So I started my time at Central Prison, and I went through a lot of other prisons, but it was my knowledge of Islam stemming from the Nation of Islam, and my knowledge of the Quran and my Arabiya, and which allowed me to have a lot of other Muslims gravitated towards me and requested that I be the imam, or either I speak, give the khutbah, which is it's a religious talk on on Friday, which is Salat al-Jumu'ah Friday, the day of assembly for Muslims all over the world, that type of stuff. So the thing that attracted them most is because of my anger and my aggression. Even in all my religious talks and khutbahs, I was the one that I was so brainwashed into, everybody else is wrong, I'm right, fight the system, fight tyranny, fight injustice, no matter where it's at. These corrupt officers, and I'm going against the correctional officers, I'm going against the quote system, unquote system, and all the penitentiaries. I had decided a long time ago that I'm making my own rules up. I'm not abide by anyone's rules, because when I came through the nation as a young man, all the way up to 75 before Elijah Muhammad passed away, I was guided and trained and directed under what we call the restricted laws of Islam. And it was like, you did this, or you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. And it was repercussions. They didn't associate with hypocrites or those in bad standings in the mosque. And anytime you violated one of the restricted laws of Islam, they disassociated themselves with you. And, you didn't want to be disassociated from your brothers. So it would kind of keep you in line. So you obeyed the laws most of the time out of fear of the consequences, being suspended and things of that nature. So when Elijah Muhammad passed away and his son, Muhammad Muhammad, started changing the structure of the Nation of Islam more towards Orthodox Islam, we no longer had the restricted laws of Islam anymore to govern us. So a lot of us, we just went back to the world and started rebelling. So it kind of put me in mind of how the law of Moses, like back in the Old Testament, you had Moses, and to teach and train the uncivilized people, he gave them the laws, the commandments. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery. And if you do, thou will get this, thou will get that. So he had the people following the laws out of the fear of the consequences if you were to get caught. So if I'm planning on committing adultery, and now this person is guilty of committing adultery, and so I'm picking up stones to stone him to death, at the same time while I'm throwing the stones at him to kill him, I'm also killing the desire within myself to commit that same act, So that's how he had the law working. But once you remove that law, then, it's just chaos and confusion. So when Christ came, he came to teach you love of the law, and to put it in your heart and embed it in your heart. So no matter what happens, where you go, who's watching, you know what I mean? You did it out of the love for it. And that was the difference. So I wasn't at that point yet. So I'm going through several prisons, and a lot of the officers, especially the high-ranking officials, because the embodiment and personality of me was in the Nation of Islam. And they stopped allowing the Nation of Islam to come into the prison systems of North Carolina. They go in any penitentiary all over the world, any federal penitentiary and things of that nature. But because of some riots that occurred back in '96 in South Carolina, and in the Nation of Islam, they was accused of the convicts being in the nation and causing it and things of that nature, So they stopped them from coming into the prison system in North Carolina. So they recognized it as a religion, but they tried to keep me under restraint, saying that I couldn't propagate it. They had to give me my books and my literatures and a study guide from Minister Louis Farrakhan and all that, because I was a registered member in the Nation of Islam. But they told me I couldn't speak it over the podiums and things of that nature. But needless to say, I still continued to deliver my message of fight oppression and tyranny and injustice. And it caused a lot of problems during my incarceration, as far as me fighting the administration, anything that I deemed that wasn't right. I had the whole community stand up with me. And, several places they had me do what they call instigating riots, because people that was following behind me, rising up against them and all. And so they shipped me to different penitentiaries and things of this nature. So
at some point, did you end up at the Spindale,
right,
the Rutherford Correctional Center? Right.
Eventually, I was at Hornet, and this when my mother first had got sick. And for a long time, they had me red flagged from Craigie's, where I couldn't go. And that was the closest brown clothes to my mother, who was here in Forest City. And that's in Buncombe County. But they wouldn't allow me to go there. So like December of 2012, my mother was sick, and so they have what they call hardship, where they had to, because she couldn't travel and things of that nature, they had to send me to the closest brown clothes they could.
And that was about brown clothes for the listeners. What does that mean?
Brown clothes is when you in like medium and medium and above. They call it brown clothes.
Medium or
security,
above security.
Yeah, and green clothes is what they call honor grade when you become like Spindale and things.
And that would be like a minimum security facility.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so Craigie's was the closest, so they shipped me to Craigie on medical hardship, and I was there, and I participated in what they had. What they had was a laundry program. And it entailed, once you complete this laundry program for 6 months, that you was allowed to go to they give you your honor grade, and you can go to any honor grade camp, which is the green clothes I was speaking of. So the closest one to my mother was Spindale. And so I picked Spindale. So 2013, I get to Spindale. Prior to this, even at Craigie's, when I give the coop ball or something, the religious talk, you had the STG, which is security group threat officers, sergeants, and them. They would call all the inmates who was who signed their name to come into to my Jumar services, and a lot of them was like Bloods and Crips and stuff like that. And then they would question them and ask them, what did I say? And try to get them to tell them what was I saying during my coupons, and seeing if I'm, instigating or doing anything like that. And they would come back and tell me and say, Brother E, man, yeah, Sergeant Phillips and them asked me what you said and this type, what was you talking about and what your coupon entailed and all that. So I get to Spindale 2013. And when I first get there, you have people that's ships from different camps and stuff. So you had a lot of people that was Muslims, but they didn't have like Jumar service and anything like that at Spindale. So, when they seen me, they was like, bro, you gonna start Jumar, that and all this type of things. And I was like, yeah, we gonna have Jumar, so that very first Friday, I go to one of the most respectful man that I've known at Spindale he was a sergeant at the time, Sergeant Garwin, because he was a true, whatever he said, what he meant what he said, and he was fair with everybody, whether you liked him or not. He was fair. He did what was right and just. So I went to him and was like, yeah, we supposed to have Jumar, every Friday. It's mandatory in the state of North Carolina that you allow Muslims a place where they can gather together and have their services. So we was having Jumar in one of the buildings, and in the buildings you have the sports side, and you have the one TV is for sports and music, and the other television is for movies and television shows like that. So they gave us the sports side where they watched the sports and the music videos and all that type of stuff. So now you talking about a place where people normally, they're not used to having Jumar on Fridays. So they just opening up their day room where they come in and they get to watch TV and and it like that. And your hours is short and limited as far as what times you can watch TV, that type of stuff. So they all sitting in there watching whatever it was they're watching, the NBA or whatever it was, like that, games and stuff. So I come in with some of the Muslims and stuff like that, and I come in and get the remote and turn the TV off, and they start like grumbling, like, what are you doing, all this, and some went out, and I guess they told the officer, whatever, he came in there and turned our TV off and all. And then the officer was like, yeah, they have to have Jumar here. And so you can see them when they leaving out, they mumbling, behind their breath on their way out the door.
Now, were you at this time, this was 2013 and on, our church was going there to have church service stuff. Were you engaging or doing anything to the Christians and the people going to the church services, the Christian church services?
I gave Christians the hardest time, and it didn't even matter where they came from. I didn't even know what word of faith was or anything else. It's just that's what we do. See, I was taught and raised, and the word opposite you have oppose, and anything that oppose you is an enemy of yours. So you fought that enemy, and to me, Christianity was an enemy to Islam. And I used to call it a slave teachings and the pie in the sky when you die teachings, turn the other cheek, and a pacified teaching, tip through the tulips type stuff.
And for time's sake, time's moving pretty quick here. What happened? Here you are sitting with me today. You have a smile on your face. We're hearing about this violent person that shot up officers undercover and so forth, and led these religious services and opposed authority and so forth. We just have just a few minutes left, about 5 minutes. Tell how you're sitting here today. Okay. What happened?
All right. What happened? Eventually, I get in trouble. I hurt somebody real bad, and they have to go to the hospital, that type of stuff. So I get put in a hole. Now I'm in the hole, and this is
and for the listeners, some may not know, what does the hole mean?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a place where they stick bad people that do something wrong, get in, and they put you in a little small cell by yourself, locked up where you can't go out, can't get out, can't do anything. So you isolated from everybody, population, all that type of stuff. So it was December 2014 when I get this letter from my Aunt Betty, my mother's last sibling that was living, and she said she was putting my mother in, she had to put my mother in the home in Fairhaven. So needless to say, it broke my heart. Like I said, my mother had 8 of us within 10 years, and I'm the baby. So I never in my whole life, I always pride myself on being in control and doing this. So I never felt so helpless in my life. So I'm sitting in a cell, and God knew exactly where to put me at, because he had me in a cell isolated from people. Because had I been around somebody and I'd have received that type of news with the love I had for my mother, somebody would have been hurt real bad, and I would have been doing life or something like that. So he had me in the right place where I couldn't hurt nobody but the walls and the doors, and I kicked on them and screamed and used profanity against police officers in the area. I'm just going crazy, and all the other convicts that were in different cells, they, Brother E, man, you all right? Brother Minister, you all right? That type of stuff. And I'm just because, I never felt so powerless in my whole life. So I'm crying out to God and don't even realize it. I'm like, Allah, God, Jesus, whatever your name is. You know what I mean? It got to be something better than this. And I know that, it takes 100% dissatisfaction to bring about a change. You can't just be 80, 70% dissatisfied and think a change going to occur in your life. You have to hit your lowest low. And that was my lowest low, because I couldn't do anything about it. And I was so helpless.
And
eventually,
is that after you had that, we were sharing with me before, is that sometime after that, is that when you started attending Christian church services?
No, I haven't been there yet. What it was when I get out, okay, I'm at Scotland now. And now it's July 2000.
This is another prison, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And now in July 2015, my sister Sharon passes away here in Forest City. So they send me here to Forest City. They bring me here to come to her funeral, attend her funeral. So I go to her funeral and I see my brothers and sisters and everybody there and all my family. And so my uncle Frank, pastors and Chaplain Logan, all of them, they giving a eulogy or whatever you want to call it. And they preaching my sister to heaven and talking about how wonderful she was, how good her heart is, and things of that nature. And I'm saying to myself, I got my kufi on and everything, and I'm like, I don't know what they talking about. All of us going to hell, because none of us, we didn't accept Jesus Christ as our Lord, Savior, that type, anything like that. We all living in, committing sin and all, and we all going, no matter how big and good and nice your heart is. So when that happened, that was the beginning. My mother actually was the beginning and had me start thinking things differently. So when I got out the hole, I didn't give any more coup balls. I was still a Muslim in the computer, but I wouldn't do any more religious talk and anything like that, because I just walked the yard, did my calisthenics workout, that type of stuff. So then when this happened with my sister, it just added to it. And it just so happened that God allowed me the very next month, August 2015, to come back to Spindale. So I gets back to Spindale, and Chaplain Logan is a real good friend of mine. I know my whole family. He lived down the street from me and things of that. So he used to talk to me all the time. So I started going to all the services, no matter whenever they call chapel, because I'm searching for something, but I just don't know what it is yet. So eventually that led me to the prison ministry, the Saturday church that we have at Word of Faith.
Word of Faith would have the Saturday church every Saturday.
Every Saturday, right? Yeah. That led the same church that I used to talk about when the guys used to come, and the big blonde haired women and all this type of stuff. But anyway, so now it led me to that, and so I'm feeling some things. So October the 8th, my Aunt Betty, she passed away. My sister was only 55 when she passed away. October the 8th, my Aunt Betty, my mother's last sibling, passed away. And that's when it really hit me. And when, eventually, when they told me, I was sitting on my bunk and I didn't have a Bible. I knew the Quran from cover to cover. but I didn't have a Bible, and something just told me, go in the day. We have a day room with big bookshelves. Go in there, and I went in the day room and I grabbed the Bible, sat down, and I started reading. Started from Matthew's, and I felt such peace. It surpassed all understanding. I don't know what it is, but me reading it, I read it all the way through the Revelations, and I was like, yeah, this is good. This is good. And so I started off at Genesis and started from and read all the way through to Malachi. And during all this time, you had guys coming up to me, hey man, you gonna have Kubar Friday? You gonna have Jumar Friday? That time, and I'm like, get away from shooing them away, that type of stuff like that. So this is where the change really started occurring. And then what really stuck to me was one day I was at Saturday's church, and I got my kufi, crown, Muslim attire, all of that on. And Douglas, one of the pastors at the church, he read this from Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 14. And it says, "Return, O faithless children of the whole 12 tribes, says the Lord, for I am Lord and master and husband to you. And I will take you, not as a nation, but individually, one from a city and two from a tribal family, and I will bring you to Zion. And I will give you spiritual shepherds after my own heart in the final time, who will feed you with knowledge and understanding and judgment." And when he read that, he personalized it. Now, I'm Muslim. He personalized it, and I got the kufi on and all this. And he said, I chose you, Derek, out of everybody in Spindale. And it just pierced my heart so much. And that's all I started. And so that's when I made the decision. And I told Chap, because I was going out on passes with Jerry Logan and Horace Carlson and them. And I said, I'm staying with Word of Faith. And that's where I'm putting my stake in the ground. And this is a year before I even got out of prison. I didn't, my family, all of them, they didn't believe it. They was like, oh, that's just some prison talk. When you get out, you'll be here with us and all this type. And I'm telling them, no, I'm moving in with Word of Faith. I'll stay with.
And we are out of time, and you could probably keep going for another a day or so, but God has transformed this man, and I want to tell you, Derek is a miracle, and we love having him. Derek got out a year ago from prison. He joined our church, and it's so hard to believe when you hear these stories, because Derek is one of the happiest guys I know. He has he's always smiling, he's always happy, and God has truly changed his life.